YouTubers, this is Random Rob. Welcome back to the new show. Tonight, I'm talking about The Long Dark. And it's funny that I happen to be doing a video about The Long Dark because, coincidentally, I got snowed in today. So it's really a perfect time to talk about this fascinating game. I think, though, I need to get into the mood. Hold on. Okay, that's more like it. So The Long Dark's been out for a few years now. This is a game by a company called Hinterland Studio. And it's essentially a wilderness survival simulator game with crafting elements. It also has a little bit of a science fiction background in that the story is supposed to take place after there has been some kind of unforeseen geomagnetic event. Your plane has crashed in the wilderness in northern Canada, and from every indication, another ice age is rapidly starting. Now, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm just going to be talking about the sandbox mode of the game. This was the first mode that was available when the game was in early access, when I started playing it. The game does have a first-person narrative adventure mode. I have never played it. Not because it's bad or anything, my prime interest in the game was in the single-player sandbox experience where you are the only human being in the story. The survival sandbox mode of this game has a terrific sense of isolation to it, and it's one of the things I really like about the game. Most of what you do in The Long Dark is try to gather supplies and food wherever you can. You spend a lot of time trekking from one shelter to another. If you can stay alive long enough and gather enough crafting supplies, you can start to manufacture more supplies for hunting. You can manufacture natural medicines to treat wounds. You can fish. In some cases, you can find handguns to use against animals. I don't really recommend it, but you can. Literally any time you exit a shelter in this game, you stand a good chance of getting killed. And that's one of the real draws of this game for me. And the game will often surprise you. You will sometimes find yourself in the most desperate circumstance. You know, maybe your character has a broken ankle, you're in the middle of a snowstorm, you have no idea if there's a shelter nearby, and suddenly you happen upon one. That can happen. At other times you can go outside when it's clear and you can see for a half mile, and you still end up getting mauled by a bear or a wolf. Most of the animals in this game will attack you. I've been killed by wolves on countless occasions, bears, and I was even stomped once by a moose, which is pretty incredible. That's the first time I've gotten multiple broken ribs in a playthrough of this game. And what I really want to talk about with The Long Dark, I really wanted to talk more about what I feel the game is about, because although The Long Dark is ostensibly a survival game, as a meta-narrative, it's really more of a game about accepting your own death. Because death is such a constant in the game. It's really the only thing in the game you can plan for. I think the longest run I've had of this, I think I made it up to about a month. 3 to 4 weeks. I think is the longest I've ever managed to stay alive in the game. And I was pretty proud of myself when I did. And there's something meditative about it. I've actually found this game very therapeutic for de-stressing when I've been suffering from bad anxiety or PTSD, which I suffer from. And the reason it helps me deal with my anxiety and PTSD is this, that the game creates a safe space where I can examine my own fears about abandonment, about dying alone, about being pursued by predators. You know, in real life I don't worry that much about being eaten by predators, but I've lived with constant fears of abandonment my whole life. And it's just such a release to be able to have a game like this, where in a sense I can soak in those fears and then put them down. And the same goes for a lot of different kinds of video games, but for me, The Long Dark does it the best. Since I've been a little boy, I've always been attracted to snow and wilderness. I used to wander in the woods near the lake by my house where I grew up. Anytime it was snowing, I could not wait to get out in the woods where there was nobody but me and tramp around in the woods and get lost and then find my way out. So to me, The Long Dark is damn near a perfect game. It's a way to deal with fear, it's a way to deal with loneliness, it's beautiful to look at. I didn't mention this earlier, but the whole art style of The Long Dark reminds me of Japanese paintings. It just has a beautiful, lovely stillness to it. And there's so many different kinds of weather variations in the game you'll encounter that you almost never see the same landscape twice. And I would also put this game at the top of a subgenre of video games that are becoming popular that I would call Snowvival games. Like the recent Frostpunk or Distrust. And there's another one called Icy Frostbite Edition. That's kind of a story-driven game. That's also pretty good. But the first game of this type I really remember playing would be D2 on the Sega Dreamcast, which was one of Kenji Ino's sort of giallo sci-fi horror games that he was known for. D2 was part of a series. The first game, D, came out on PC and PlayStation. I think it was also on the 3DO. He did a second game in the series called Enemy Zero, which was on the Sega Saturn. And then D2, which was on the Dreamcast, which was one of the first 3D survival horror games of its type. At any rate, D2 similarly had the mute protagonist Laura. Her plane crashes in the wilderness in Canada, and the survivors of the plane crash have been scattered all over this mountain valley and have been infected by this Cthulhuoid alien life force, which has turned them into these sort of tentacle-spewing monsters, kind of like something out of John Carpenter's The Thing. So the gameplay would involve exploration, hunting. That was the first game I remember you could hunt in. You could shoot rabbits, deer, and moose. You also had to get food for a sick companion, so it hooked you right away into the survival narrative. Anyway, just an older game that's worth looking up if you can find it and emulate it or find an existing copy of it. Really interesting game to look at. It's experimental, the gameplay is wonky, but it's got a terrific mood. So what are some of your favorite survival games? Let me know on my Patreon page, and maybe I can talk about them in the future. And that about wraps it up for now. Be good, stay warm, and I'll see you next time on the new show. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.